Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the 10 best sounding Ark tames. In at number 10 is the Wyvn, and the Wyvn has been around in Ark for a while now, having its first debut in Scorched Earth all the way back, and since then there has been a significant amount more Wyverns which have actually been added to the game of Ark. Namely, there is now Crystal Wyverns as well as Ice Wyverns, which were introduced on Ragnarok, and obviously you're not going to get Ice Wyverns on Scorched Earth. And the sound of a Wyvern is so recognizable. When these things breathe fire or shoot lightning or do all of that, you can just instantly tell it's a Wyvern and a creature of immense power. It really does summarize these creatures so well. It is just such a creepy, horrific sound of immense power, which summarizes these creatures greatly. And obviously, in terms of their uses, the Wyverns are great creatures, actually, namely for wood gathering, if you didn't know already, as if you use the C attack ability on the ground, it's actually pretty good at harvesting wood, but you'll probably use it more for doing dogfights in the air. Obviously not quite as well as the Astrocetus, but in terms of fighting just in the air and aerial combat, and also just combat on the ground as well, it's actually pretty decent, and it can pick up a wealth of creatures as well. Definitely a creature at some point which I think you should tame. Now, the Bulbdog has one of the best sound designs out there for any Ark creature, as obviously it is on this list, and its sound design is just so cute and caring, and yet sometimes a little bit off, that it really does summarize this creature's personality really well. This creature is just so cute and horrifying at the same time, and it makes you want to hug it and at the same time get rid of it too. In terms of the Bulbdog's use though, these are mainly really only going to be used on Arboration, as they don't really have much of a use on other maps, and essentially they will just debuff Reapers and other creatures like that. But before we continue, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. The Modus has been in Ark, actually not for very long at this point, but it is definitely a creature which I think has a really great sound design, and the sound on this thing does sound exactly like what you'd expect a bat of this size to sound like in real life. A lot better than the sounds which you'll get out of the Onyx, and it is just so good in terms of all of its sounds and its atmosphere as a creature. The Desmodus is just a really well designed creature and very well rounded, and one which I think you should tame at some point, and especially considering it does spawn on Fjorda, so it is on a free DLC map. It is so easy and accessible for every Ark players to tame. Although, yes, it may not be the easiest tame, I kind of lied a bit there, but it is still a very accessible tame, and if you go for a low level first, it's not the hardest tame you'll find. Definitely not to the extent of what a Shadow Main would be. It's the exact same taming method as the Bloodstalker. You simply just feed this blood pags, and this is definitely a tame you'll want, as it is full of so many abilities. Now, many people won't consider the Caro to have great sound design, and a lot of people do diss the Caro out there, but in my opinion, the Caro is just such a well-rounded and designed tame, and its sound design really does summarize it well. It just has so much heft in its sound. It really just feels like this is a creature of immense power, and albeit it is not the same size as something like a Rex, but it is still an insanely powerful Ark tame, and it has a lot of uses in the game as well, and it can inflict that bleed ability with its second attack as well, which I know is a lot less obvious in ASA, as obviously some of the B-roll on this video is ASA. It's a bit of a mix and match at the moment, and it will be until all the DLCs are out, but that bleed ability is still being afflicted. And also in terms of the Caro's other uses as well, this is actually a pretty good travel mount, and it isn't too bad of a boss creature as well, but maybe just save it for the Gamma boss fights, as again, it doesn't really rack up to something like a Rex or an Aloe or a Spino or something like that, but its sound design is so well rounded and well designed, I simply had to include it on this list. Now, the Megalosaurus is really a creature with insane sound design, and I feel like I am kind of going on a bit there, but this creature really does have an insanely great atmosphere compared to a lot of other carnivores out there. This thing literally sleeps during the day, but in the night this thing turns into an absolute beast of a tame, and it actually has some really cool animations to go around it as well. Obviously, when it's not literally pooping at the same time. But you know, that is Ark for you. And the Megalosaurus is a similar size to a Carno, and I'm pretty sure it is a more powerful creature than the Carno. And just its atmosphere really makes this thing a significantly better creature in terms of sound design. And it does have a much higher amount of abilities. It is just a slightly more well-rounded version of the Carno, which obviously is only downside being that you can only really use this thing at nighttime. If you're one of those people that just use console commands, then you can just always set nighttime to be on, or you can just set time of day and then just chuck the time in as nighttime. But these are really useful in operation, as it counts as always night. Unless you're on the surface, but you can't be on the surface in the day, so it is always night when you're using one of these things. So on operation, these are by far one of the go-to carnivores on the map, and it's definitely the option for going down into the red zone and obviously getting those rock drake eggs, which are obviously a crucial part of operation as well. But the Megalosaurus just has a really great sound design and a great atmosphere. I had to include it on the list. In at number 5 is the Rex, and obviously this creature does have to be on the list somewhere. The Rex is just such an influential Ark creature, and its roar is definitely something which shouldn't be laughed about. It is an insanely powerful, deep roar, which is a really creepy sound to listen to, unless you've just heard it a lot. And I know over time it does get a little bit boring and annoying and you kind of zone it out, but if you hear that for the first time and you're not expecting it, it is a very scary thing. But it is also the way that you can tell a Rex is aggroed on you, as it will just roar really loudly. Could be a bit scarier, or it could just make the game a little bit easier actually sometimes, as it gives you a bit of time to go away, because obviously it can't move while it is doing that roar ability. And the Yeti is another great creature with that roar as well, except its roars actually do something. The Rex's roar will just simply make your character defecate, and will also probably dismount you from mounts, or I think it's discontrol. It's either discontrol or dismounting of some small amounts, so definitely be careful if you're on a Pteranodon and you're near a Rex, as if it roars it will either dismount you or you lose control of your mount. Something like that will happen, and you could seriously lose a lot of your Ark progress. And especially considering ASA is out now and a lot of new players are coming into Ark, there's just a tip which you should definitely follow along with. Now, the Kronosaurus did have to be on this list. It is just an insanely huge, powerful carnivore, and yes, I know the general trend is the big, large carnivores do have the best sound design, and it pretty much is that for the rest of this list. Sorry about that if you were expecting something different, but it really is the coolest sounds do come from the biggest, largest Ark carnivores, and the Kronosaurus is definitely one of them. Obviously, being a very new introduction to Ark, it's one of Ark's newest creatures now. Obviously, the Rhinogonatha's newer, but this is still a very new Ark creature in my eyes, and I don't know, it may not even be available on some versions of Ark currently. Obviously, it is on the console versions and PC. It's obviously not going to be out on mobile, but I'm not sure if it's out on Switch yet. For any Ark Switch players out there, comment down below, is the Kronosaurus out on Ark Switch yet? And obviously, in terms of their use, obviously apart from their fantastic roar, which is why they're on this list, these are going to be great on Extinction for killing the Titans, and they're just great on other maps as well, just for dealing that damage. Obviously you can't use them on bosses on other maps, but they're just great for dealing all of that damage and getting obviously that damage done, and getting whatever you need to be killed pretty quickly and efficiently with no fuss at all. And these larger carnivores are definitely great if you're into farming meat. In at number 3 is the Giga, and I usually put the Kronosaurus above the Giga in terms of the lists, which I do. But in terms of sound design, the Giga has a better roar, and it's just a lot more nostalgic as well. And again, we're switching over to ASA here, and the contrast of graphics is actually pretty surprising when you're putting it in contrast. Obviously, the frame rate's lower, but ASA is an extremely intensive, demanding game, and I do urge you, if you're thinking of buying it on PC, be sure you have the right specs for it. It is extremely intensive at the moment, but if it does get optimized in the future, you may be with some luck. And again, the Giga's use is pretty much the same as the Kronosaurus, and it is not really as useful as the Kronosaurus in my eyes, but it just has a better and more nostalgic sound design. It's raw, it's just, it's so iconic, although it doesn't make you defecate like the Rex's roar, at least I'm pretty sure it doesn't. It is still a significantly cooler roar than the one on the Rex, and obviously it's a much bigger carnivore than the Rex, so what would you expect, really? And it is just so big, it didn't even need to swim to cross that passage of water. The Giga is an absolutely insane creature with insane size and insane abilities as well, sadly losing its bleed ability once tamed, but it is still an insanely great creature, one of which I think you should really tame at some point. But always be careful of their rage meter, which the Kronosaurus doesn't have, as you know, you could seriously lose that Giga tame, which is something you really don't want to do. In at number 2 is the Astrocetus, and this creature is one of immense size, and in my opinion, its sound design is just so nice, and I do urge you to go and listen to these creatures afterwards. And yes, I'm sorry that I'm not giving you these sounds in this video, but there are many great shorts out there from art creators if you did want to listen to these sounds. Again, I know it is kind of ironic I'm making a sound designs video and all of that, but this is just the B-roll which I have available to me at the moment, which I've made, and I don't really have the time with studying and things like that to get all of this out for you and obviously keep consistent uploads, but I'm sure you understand that already. Now, with my rant over, in terms of the Astrocetus's abilities, this thing is just a great PvP creature for just getting things done, and I'm pretty sure it has missiles and turrets as well. It's a really great creature for that back of a PvP raid, as it really is a creature which you can rely on and stay strong with. But before we get into number 1, just as a little honourable mention, I'm going to put the U2 here. I did mention it when I was speaking about the Rex, but this thing seriously has great sound design, and its roars have great uses in the game as well. Definitely a great creature which so many ARC players use, and it is an extremely useful one which I urge you to tame at some point. And finally, in at number 1 is the Reaper, and many of you probably would have expected this thing to be in the number 1 spot. The Reaper just has an absolutely insane atmosphere around it, and it is one of the most well-designed creatures out there when it comes to ARC tames, and definitely one which, if you have tamed at some point, you should be very proud of taming, and you'll obviously be greatly satisfied with this tame. It is an insane creature capable of so much damage, and it has so much health, and it is just a really great creature which, if you have Gen 2, can be very easily accessible to you and can be your first tame as well. Go watch Raasclark's little tutorial video, just look up Raasclark Easy Reaper Tame, and you'll find yourself with something along those lines on how to tame yourself a Reaper really easily on Gen 2, but sadly on AB and other maps like that where you'll find Reapers, there is no easy way to get around it, but I kind of prefer it that way. The Reaper is an insanely cool and also, in my opinion, very hard tame, and it is worth it really, considering its power and the fact that you can just get it in Gen 2 really easily. It does show the complete imbalance of Gen 2, but I guess that is just the state of ARC at the moment, and hopefully ASA does fix a few of these things as the DLCs get further outed. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this top 10, and I want to hear also what your top 10 favourite creature sound designs are in ARC, and I'll see you all later.